My name is Ian Hamilton. I am a UX designer and accessibility specialist. So in English, that means that I work on user interfaces to make sure that they are easy to understand and satisfying to use. It also means that I work on avoiding unnecessary barriers for people with disabilities. So it can be a bit of an intimidating thing to try and start to get your head around kind of the idea of all these thousands of different disabilities that there are. But the thing that's important isn't so much the medical condition, it's the barrier that you come up against. So for example, the barrier of text that's too small actually affects a whole swathe of different medical conditions. So it actually kind of only comes down to 4 or 5 broad areas, which is difficulty seeing, difficulty hearing, difficulty speaking, and motor ability, which is ability to operate a controller basically, and also cognitive, which is the ability to understand and remember and process information. It all comes down to 2 core principles, which are communicating information in more than one way. So that might be, for example, subtitles as well as audio, or an icon as well as a colour. And then the other thing is just allowing players some degree of flexibility in the way that they're playing. So that might be through difficulty levels, choice of either using a controller or a mouse, those kind of things. Those 2 principles, allowing flexibility, communicating information more than one way, they're just good general game design anyway. So a lot of the kind of features that are involved are both easy to do and actually benefit all players, not just those with disabilities. One really common accessibility consideration now, something that wasn't a consideration really at all a few years ago, but it's really improved in the last couple of years, has been colour blindness. Developer awareness of colour blindness has really been increasing. Colour blindness is an interesting one because it's really common. 8% of males, so a huge chunk of the population, are affected by it. And pretty much everybody's heard of colour blindness. At the same time, it's difficult to kind of picture what colour blindness looks like. So some people imagine that it's actually being completely colourblind, so you only see in black and white, which is not really the case. There are some people, but it's a tiny fraction of a percent of people who see in black and white. For most people, it's just one particular receptor in your eye that's deficient, so it's one particular range of colour. So you actually see most colours okay, but for the most common type, which is red-green, basically the whole spectrum between red and green all looks the same hue. So you can tell differences in brightness, you can tell light green and dark red apart, but it will appear to be kind of light greeny brown and dark greeny brown. So if you've got 2 that's similar brightness, even though to everyone else it might be a really obvious distinction, that whole range all kind of merges in together. Which is obviously a huge problem if you've got something like, a Call of Duty game, for example, using red and green for its team colours. A really common misconception amongst developers is that disability is really uncommon. The amount of times that I've heard just the assumption that it only affects less than 1% of the population. And it's always that same figure, people say less than 1% of the population, but actually the official government statistics are 18%. And that's not even including stuff like colour blindness, which is 8% of males, low reading age, which is 14% of adults. It's really huge numbers. In the last couple of years, there's been a few efforts at kind of consolidating all the various bits of accessibility knowledge into sets of guidelines. So in particular in 2012, there was 2 sets of guidelines that came out. One is called Includification. The other one is called GameAccessibilityGuidelines.com. So the knowledge and information is all out there. It's just a case of putting it into practice. Yeah, it's only going to get more and more important as time goes on because gaming isn't the preserve of a couple of hobbyists or kids or that kind of stuff. It is now an interwoven part of our culture. So actually being denied access to an important part of culture is a really big deal. And that's why, part of the reason at least why accessibility is so important is because games are so important, and that's only going to increase as time goes on. One really common